All right, so welcome to our second part of the series. So today I wanted to talk about something that everybody needs to know how to do to get a job, which is how to write a resume or a CV or a cover letter. What's the difference between resumes and CVs, and what are cover letters? And I'll try to give you some examples of good and bad examples of those kinds of things. So what's a resume? So how many people in here have written a resume before? All right. How many people have written a CV? All right. So let's talk a little bit about what the difference between the two of them is. A resume is typically what you use to get a job, typically in a non-academic setting. A CV or a curriculum vitae would be what you'd use to get a job in an academic setting. A resume is usually much shorter. All right. So it's short and sweet. In other words, what you want to do is you want to grab the attention of the person that you're applying to the job for. Now, you're gonna have two pieces of data, if you will, that you're going to use to grab their attention. One is a cover letter, which basically is a short letter which explains why you're interested in the job. Usually, you're applying for a position that they've advertised. And then the second thing is the resume itself, which tells your life history in terms of what you've done that qualifies you for this job. So the key thing in a resume, a curriculum vitae is usually much longer and much more detailed, but a resume is short. You want to have it to be 1 or 2 pages. You can double-side it so that it's nice that it fits on one sheet of paper. Because typically when you're applying to a job, the person who's going to be looking at your resume is going to have a lot of these resumes in front of them. And they're going through these quickly. And they want to be able to figure out right away whether you're the right person for the job. Are you somebody that they want to bring in for an interview? So you want to have bullet points. You want to have very short things. You don't need complete sentences. You don't need paragraphs. And I'll give you some examples of that. You want to tailor it to the position that you're applying for. So don't just write one resume and that's your only resume. If you're applying for a data analysis job, you would have one kind of resume. If you're applying for a data management job, you'd have another kind of resume. Now, there's going to probably be a lot of overlap because obviously your resume is going to tell something about your education, it's going to tell something about your previous job history, but you're going to emphasize different things. So you might have had a job where you did analysis and you did data management, you did some computing. Emphasize some of those in some jobs and some of those in others. Now, what are the sections of a resume? Well, you're going to have your contact information, all right? You're going to have your education. So how can they reach you? Where did you go to school? What kind of degrees did you have? Your experience, where you've worked, particularly jobs that apply to the job you're applying to. Early in your career, you may have every job you've ever done. As you go along, you may cut some out. So when you're applying for your first job, let's say in college, you might put on it that you worked at McDonald's, serving burgers. Well, that's actually important at that point in your career because that is an instance of you've done a job. Did you show up for work? Were you attendant to what you were supposed to do? Did you flip the burgers right? Did you follow the rules? And they're going to call your boss for a reference, and that's important. Later on, when you've maybe worked in a few labs and you've done some summer internships and things, flipping burgers isn't important anymore. You can drop that off your resume. Now, what are some of the skills you want to describe? So your education, your experience, and what skills do you have? What kind of computer programs do you know? What kind of languages might you speak? So for example, you may be applying for a job which is going to be dealing with people who speak Spanish. So if you speak Spanish, you put that down. What kind of statistical programming do you know? What kind of general programming do you know? What kind of office software do you know? All that kind of stuff is useful to put down. Try to avoid personal information. You don't need to put, if you're married, you don't need to put down you're married or how many kids you have, or you don't need to put down that you'd like. I mean, some people like to put down hobbies, and I guess that can sort of go either way. Don't put anything that's embarrassing, obviously, but you want to look professional, right? So you don't want to put down that if you think some hobby is important to who you are. For example, you play ultimate frisbee on a professional team. You know, that indicates that you have a lot of dedication, that you're a good athlete, that you're probably in pretty good shape. Maybe that can be okay to put down. On the other hand, if you like to, I don't know, play, you know, War of the Worlds or something, or Game of Thrones on video games, it's probably not something you want to put on your resume, unless you're going for a gaming job. Maybe it's important there. And then the other thing is, check your work. Make sure that the formats are consistent, that there are no typos, because the employer is going to look at it quickly. And the worst thing, and I've seen this before, you have a cover letter, you have a resume, and there's a typo on the very first line. It just looks like you're not very attentive to details. And that's what employers are looking for. Are you going to do a good job? Okay. The CV is an academic resume. It's usually longer. It will have a list of everywhere you've gone to, every paper you've published with a full citation, every course you've taught. We'll have if you've reviewed for journals. So if you get into the academic environment, this is typically what you'll see. I'll show you, we see some examples. You could actually look online at the Biostat site. All the CVs of all the professors are up there. You can see what these look like. There's not one way of doing it. Every institution often has its own format. It will tell you a lot about that person in terms of what they've done, what their experience is. But again, it's just like a longer resume in a way. Okay, the next thing is the cover letter. So the cover letter is what you write to say, dear so-and-so, I'm interested in your job. Why should you look at my resume? Why should you bring me in for an interview? So it's really an important letter. It's got to be short because they're not going to have time to read long letters, but it's also got to get across certain information. So first of all, it's your introduction to your employer. Your potential employer does not know who you are, right? They don't have your Facebook page, although they may look it up, and again, that's something to be careful of. Don't put things on your Facebook page that you want a potential employer to see. But it's got to be stuff that they will be interested in right away. So it's got to grab their attention, and it's got to have certain elements. First of all, it's an example of your writing skill. So for those of you who are going into jobs where writing is important, a resume, because it's just got bullet points, is going to not necessarily reflect your writing skill. It doesn't have complete sentences. A letter has complete sentences. It has organized thoughts. So make sure it's well written. Make sure it doesn't have spelling errors. It doesn't have typographical errors. Doesn't have grammatical mistakes. And make sure that it's coherent. You might want to have a friend or somebody read it over. What do you need to put in that letter? Well, you need to explain why you want the job. So they've advertised a job for you. You need to explain why you want that job, why you're qualified for the job, why you're the right person for it, how enthusiastic you are for the job. You want to say, I really would like to do this because it's going to enhance my career and so forth, and it can help me grow. And convey that you understand what the requirements and the qualifications are. If the job is for somebody with a PhD and you don't have a PhD, then that's probably not the right job for you. If they say that they would like somebody who's dedicated, who's willing to work long hours, is excited about being in that field, express that in your letter, right? They're basically, in their advertisement, they're telling you what they're looking for. Tell them back why you are the right person for them. Okay? They have to be persuasive. Remember that the reader's probably looking at a lot of letters. We had somebody here last week who was talking about academic jobs and was saying that for every one job, there's 1,000 applicants in some of these positions. That's true everywhere. Even though there are a lot of jobs for statisticians and for those of us who do data analysis, there still is a lot of competition. And for the good jobs, there's going to be a lot of really serious competition. So if you want to go work at Google, or you want to work at Apple, or you want to work at some big marketing company in New York, everybody else is going to want to work there too. And so you need to be able to convince the employer that you're the right person for the job. And yours has to stick in the employer's mind. In other words, when the employer is reading all these letters, they have to think to themselves, you know, I really like that letter where that person from Brown told me such and such. Okay? That will get you the interview. So you're selling yourself. That's the key thing. Now, what's the format? Well, you say, dear so-and-so. All right? Now, sometimes you'll have a name. Sometimes the name that's given is the administrator of the program. It's not the person who's actually doing the hiring. Sometimes it is. Make sure that the right name is there and that you address them appropriately. What do you say? Well, in the first paragraph, you want to describe what you're applying for. I'm applying for the job that was advertised in such and such that does such and such, because they may have several advertisements out there and they don't know what you're applying to. Explain how you learned about the position. I read your advertisement, a friend of mine contacted me. If, for example, one of your professors tells you about a potential job, mention that in your letter, because that professor or that person that you're working with may know the person who's looking for the job. That's a personal connection. That's important to know. Professor Hogan told me that you're looking for data analysts, and I'm applying for that job. All right, we'll be having people come in during the year who've expressed interest in hiring people. In that case, you have your connection already established. But in other cases, you might be writing a letter to somebody that you don't know. And then explain why you're interested in the job. What is it about this job that makes it important for you to apply for it and makes it important to your career? All right? Not just I need the money or I'm looking for a job because I'm unemployed or whatever. I would really like this job because it will enable me to improve my computing skills and apply them in a marketing situation, and I'm very interested in going into marketing for a career, for example. Second paragraph, what skills do you have for the position? All right? I'm a good computer programmer. Well, say what you're a good computer programmer. I can program in C and in Fortran and in Python, and I know R and Stata, and I'm very good with Microsoft, Office or something like that. Or I am a very good communicator. Or I've taught several courses, and I've got good recommendations. Explain the training that you have that supports the role. If you're going to be going to computer programming, what computer programming have you done? If you're going to go to a job which is going to be an advertising job, what kind of advertising have you done? What kind of communication skills do you have? And give specific examples of experiences you have that support that. Next paragraph, reiterate your interest. You're closing now. You're trying to say, I really would like this job for the following reasons. And tell them that you're available for an interview. I would be happy to interview you if you like my application, and tell them how to contact you, and you hope to hear from them. The worst thing is when you write a nice letter and you forgot to tell them how to contact you. Then they can't get to you, right? And if you want, you can tell them that you have some references available that they can consult if necessary. But usually that will happen after the interview. The first thing you want to do is get the interview. Okay, now, recommendations. So let's say you got the interview, they liked you, now they want some recommendations. All right? So there's a couple of different types of recommendations that are done. I get asked these. People will say, so-and-so has applied to a job and is given your name as a recommender. So a lot of times those recommendations are letters, but other times they're telephone calls. All right? So those are a little bit different. A lot of times the phone call is a little more personal. It means that the employer can ask specific questions that they're interested in, things that might have come up in the interview that they're curious about. But sometimes they just want a generic letter. And what I try to do when I write a letter is I try to find out what the job is, and I try to say something personal about the person I'm writing the letter for. For example, I had a student last year who was applying for a job, and this student was very quiet, never said a word. And I was a little worried that if they they might have come across in an interview like that, as somebody who wasn't terribly interested or whatever, because sometimes people can interpret that. So my point was, this is a very quiet person, but it's a very dedicated person, and they're just fairly shy. But it doesn't mean that they're not interested in the job, and it doesn't mean that they aren't going to do a good job. It just means that that's their personality. Make sure you pick the right people for your recommendation. If you were at a job and you're not really quite sure whether the person who is in charge there liked you, probably not a good person to pick. Try to pick people who will give you a good recommendation, who know you well, and who know you personally, not just, again, it's like when you apply to graduate school, right? If you pick somebody who taught you in a class, but that person doesn't really know you at all they know is the grade you got, that's not a very good recommendation. Because the people evaluated can look at your transcript and see what your grade is, right? They want to know who you are personally. Are you going to do well in the school? Are you going to try hard? Are you going to go the extra mile? Are you going to get involved in activities? That's what they're interested in. So the person should know you and your work well. The person should be a good writer, because you want them to clearly convey what's important about you. They should have the proper credentials. If it's somebody who really likes you, but they're not a professionally high-level person, they may not get the same respect. So, for example, you might have some friend in your town who really likes you, maybe a parent of your best friend. That's great if that parent is like a high, a very well-connected doctor or something like that. But if the person has a position that's outside the field you're going into, that may not carry much weight. And obviously they should be well respected as well. Okay, so for people that you're asking a recommendation, give them your CV or your resume and describe the position you're applying to. Help them out by either drafting the letter if they have to write a letter, or giving them the talking points. In other words, what should they say about you? All right? Now, usually that person can write the letter on their own, but the reason I usually ask for talking points or a draft is because A, I'm busy and I don't necessarily want to start from scratch on every single letter, and B, I would like to know what it is about the job and your background that's important to you. What is it you'd like me to emphasize? I may know a lot of things about you, but I don't know necessarily, I didn't go to this interview, I don't know exactly what this job's about, so I may not know exactly what to emphasize about you. And there's some things I might not know. So for example, you're applying for a computer job and it turns out you're a fantastic C++ programmer. I don't know that. I don't say that in my letter, therefore my letter's not as strong. Give the employer the full contact information for your references so they can easily get in touch with them. It's usually an email and a phone number. And give the recommender, the person you're asking the recommendation from, the full information about where to send the recommendation and when it's due. The worst thing is when recommendations are late and you lose the job because the person that is recommending for you didn't come through. That's, again, another thing to know the person you're recommending. If they're a very busy person who's often late on things, they may not be the best person to write the recommendation. And don't be afraid to remind them if it's, say to them, could you please let me know when you've sent your recommendation in, or if it's getting near the due date, you might want to send them a small reminder. And finally, don't give out a recommender's name unless the recommenders agree. Don't give somebody names and then don't tell the recommender. Ask them first, can I use you as a recommendation? So if you're writing a recommendation letter, you're going to want to, so again, this is useful for you if you're drafting it. You want to explain the relationship to the prospective employee. I taught the person in class, or they worked on a research project with me, or I wrote a paper with them. Why is the individual qualified for the job? What are their skills? Specific examples are often useful in these letters. Say something about some contact you've had with that person. Like, I worked with, so I'll pick on Joe for a second since he's working with me. So Joe's been working with me on this project, and he's been doing a lot of programming. So I can say that, Joe has participated in weekly conference calls, and he's contributed. He's described changes he's made to the code, and when there's been troubleshooting, he's been very, very good at explaining what the problem is and what a solution could be. All right, so that tells the employer something. It tells them two things. One is, I know this person well, and secondly, this person has actually come through in situations where the employer may also need that person to come through. All right. And then make the recommendation and agree to be contacted. If you need further information, you can contact me. If they're phone calls, if they're going to do phone calls, there's more risk here because in a letter, you can kind of write nice language and nobody's going to probe very deeply. On a phone, you can pick up tone. So if somebody isn't really solid and the recommender is not really solid in the recommendation, you can pick that up in a phone call. Well, was the person very good at coming to work every day? Well, most of the time, yeah, they came through. Well, that's not quite as strong as, yes, they were there every day and they came early and they left late. Whereas in the letter, I might say, I might either say nothing at all about it, or I might say this person was prompt, but I might not get into any details about that. And that's why, by the way, why sometimes employers prefer calls, because they can get sort of more information that way. Make sure your recommender can be reached. A lot of times people are busy. If you have a doctor that you're getting a recommendation for, and they're a surgeon, they're going to be in surgery all day, they may be very hard to reach during business hours. Not necessarily the best idea to choose somebody like that. But if you really do want to use them, make sure the employer knows the best time to talk to that person. So you can reach this person, but probably not till after 7 o'clock. The phone call is more like an interview, so they can probe, they can get more information. They can sort of, let's say there's certain information they want to know that maybe something came out in the interview and they're not really sure about something and they want to ask about that, they can probe for that. Okay, that's not necessarily going to come out in a letter. And it's easy to spot if your champion doesn't know you well. So if they start asking involved questions and your recommender says, I don't really know about that, I've never seen the person in that situation, then they may say, well, this isn't really the right person to make the recommendation for. Some of the questions they can ask is, how well does this person work in a team setting? So let's say you're going into a job where you're going to be working with other individuals. You might be a wonderful student, but if your recommender is a professor who's had you in a class, that professor may have absolutely no idea how you work in a team setting. They may know you do wonderful homework and you do great on exams, but I have no idea whether you work well with other individuals. How responsible and reliable are they? Well, we can oftentimes attest to that, but I don't know you in every situation, and so therefore I may not know how to answer that question. But you want some people who do know how to answer that question, at least in certain situations. Do they complete tasks given to them? So do you do a good job? Do you finish everything up? Are you thorough? And do they waste time? That's another question. So you might be a really brilliant person who can get work done really quickly, but you tend to waste a lot of time, or you're late on things, or those are things that are sort of red flags to employers. Now, when you go to the interview, this is where you and the employer are assessing whether you're the right fit. So not only is the employer interviewing you, in a sense you're interviewing the employer, right? You've applied to this job because it sounds good on paper, but this is your chance now to find out whether this is the right environment for you. So for example, let's say it's a computing job and you really want to do this because this is going to really advance your career, but when you're there you find out that these guys tend to work 16 hours a day, 6-7 days a week, and they expect me to be here while there's a product being developed. Well, that might not be the environment you want to work in. So I remember going to an interview when I was coming out of college, and it was a place in New York City. It was a big insurance company, and the guy started talking about, we're the numbers crunchers, we're this, and I could tell right away this was going to be a job where I was just going to be sitting in front of a terminal all day, typing in numbers for people, and I wasn't going to have any responsibility, and it was just going to be a really boring job. So that was out as far as I was concerned. So what does the employer want to know? They want to know, do you have qualifications and skills for the job? Do you have the personal qualities they're looking for? Are you dedicated? Do you work well with other people? Are you friendly? You know, do you dress well or at least decently? You know, do you have weird habits that, you know, are going to annoy people? And will you fit into the culture of that office? Every office has a different culture. Some offices, everybody likes to dress in jeans. Other offices, everybody needs to dress in, you know, three-piece suits and you know, wonderful dresses with all kinds of makeup and everything. And you may not fit into some of those cultures. You want to know, is this the right job for me? Would I like to work in this office? And are the benefits sufficient? All right, so ask the question, how much money do I get paid? What kind of insurance do I get? How many days off do I get? If I'm sick, you know, is my job, I mean, some offices, basically people come to work no matter how sick they are because they realize if they don't, they're not going to get the next opportunity. If that's okay with you, then that's a good job for you. If that's not the kind of job you want to know that right away. Who's going to interview you? All right, there's a lot of different people that do interviews. So it could be the person who actually you're going to be working with, the scientist you're going to be working with, or the manager you're going to be working with. It could be an administrator. They could just be doing screening interviews. You could be meeting with a HR, human resources person who's basically just doing a quick screen to see whether you're a reliable kind of person. And then if you pass that screen, then they'll send you on to the other person. You could be interviewed by coworkers. So I remember going on job interviews where, you know, it was a whole day thing and I met with 5 or 6 different people, and I would meet with senior people and then I'd meet with junior people. And the junior people are there to find out whether they think you would work well with them. So all of those different kinds of interviews lead to different types of responses that you're looking for and different things you can learn about. So the administrator, usually when you show up at an interview, let's say it's an all-day thing and you've got 4 or 5 interviews on a schedule, you'll typically meet with the administrator first. This might have been the person you corresponded with initially. They will set the scene. They will tell you who you're going to meet with, what the company's like. This is where you might be able to ask questions about benefits, about vacation, about office hours, and so forth, how flexible they are. In other words, if you have a child and you've got to take the child to daycare or pick them up from daycare, does the office allow that? It's also often the last person you see, so sometimes you can take the information that you've gathered over the day and you might have some additional questions and you can ask them at that point. They'll describe the office environment. Usually they'll try to relax you. Oh, you know, would you like a cup of coffee? Here's a nice chair, so on. But remember, they are evaluating you. So, you know, if you're talking to them, but you're not looking them in the eye, you're looking off to the side, that's an indication that, you know, maybe you're not very good with people and you're very uncomfortable with people, and maybe that's not what they're looking for. This person is usually the person who's trying to make the office run smoothly. This is the person who, if 2 employees get into an argument, they're the person who tries to smooth things down so that you don't have arguments and bad feelings going on. So they're going to be assessing you for that kind of thing. Is this the kind of person who's going to have a good attitude? Are they going to be the type of person who's going to be mean or nasty? Do they look like they have good people skills? Do they look like they are friendly? Those are the kinds of things that these people are looking for. Usually they're not the technically competent person, so this isn't the right person to ask, do you guys use you know, this operating system or that operating system? Ask that for the technician when you meet with them. And they could generally answer questions about the environment. You might ask questions like, do you have some good restaurants around here, you know, to eat lunch at? Or what do people do after work? Do they get together and do they go out for a drink together? Or do they go to movies together? Are people here friendly, or do they just all go home to their homes and never see each other outside work? Those are the kind of questions you can ask of somebody like this. The senior scientist is going to explain the job. This is usually the person you're going to be working for. So they're going to describe the qualities that they're looking for. What qualities are they looking for you in here? Are they looking for a good programmer who instantly knows everything? Or are they looking for somebody that they can develop? And they don't really care if you know the technical material right away. They just want to know, do you have an understanding of the processes so that you can grow in the job? They're going to probe you for your qualifications, your skills, your competency. They might ask you all kinds of questions like, have you ever done this before? Have you done that before? Have you studied this? Who did you work with in the past? They may set up tasks. A lot of interviews now will set up little tests for you. For example, they might give you, if it's a programming job, they might ask you to program something on the fly. They just to see how you do. Or if it's a job where you're going to be teaching, they might bring somebody in and say, you know, explain this method to somebody. They'll ask you about your previous experience. So what kind of jobs did you do? What did you do in those jobs? What communications did you have with people? They want to know your goals. So they might ask you questions like, where do you want to be in 5 years? What are you trying to get out of this job? They may know it's a stepping stone kind of job. There may be other jobs in the company you can go to. They might say, you know, we're really happy to have you working for Pfizer Pharmaceuticals. What would you, if you stayed with Pfizer, where would you like to be? You know, are you looking to go up the scientific path, the administrative path, or what? And they may give you some kind of a skills test. So we do this upstairs. We do a lot of abstract screening and stuff. So people who come to work for us, oftentimes we'll give them a little test in Word or Excel and ask them to organize things just to see how they do with that, you know, or do they have those skills. The coworkers. So this is somebody who's pretty much at your level. They want to know things like, can I work with this person? Is this person going to be a total jerk that, you know, I don't even want to see ever? Or is this somebody I can really talk to? They're going to ask, this is where you can ask questions about the job of somebody who is going to be at your level. So, you know, does your boss ask you for unreasonable things? Or, I mean, probably that's a little bit of a loaded question, but you could ask things like, how late do you guys work? Do you have to be here on weekends? Do you take work home with you? How do they feel about taking information out of the office? What's the firewall like? Is there a lot of interference from the upper management? They'll tell you about the office lifestyle. You know, what can I wear to work? Do people go out? Do people have lunch together? It may involve a meal. So sometimes if it's a day-long interview, you might have lunch with these people. You know, you're answering questions, so try not to be, you know, have your mouth full all the time when they ask questions. But, you know, just simple things. You can tell a lot about people from different situations they're in. And typically the senior manager who's doing the actual hiring is going to ask this person for their opinion of you. So you want to make sure it's a good opinion. You don't want to just talk about you know, kind of fun things, because then you might think that's, hey, that was a really great person. I really liked, you know, Joanne. She was a lot of fun, and we had a great lunch together. But Joanne's impression may be, this person is not serious. All they want to talk about is, you know, what movie they went out to, or what concert they saw, or what clothes they're wearing, right? You might think that was a great conversation, but for a job interview, that might turn out to be a really bad situation for you. And finally, you can find out whether the supervisors there are good. The human resources person, this is the personnel department. They'll tell you about your benefits, your salary. One thing is, these guys are expert interviewers. They've usually been trained in interviewing. They're going to ask certain questions. What they're after is this employee going to come to work on time? Are they going to dress well? Do they speak well? Are they shy? Do they know their stuff? They're not going to be looking for the technical stuff. They're going to be looking for the sort of the human relations kind of thing. They're looking for personality traits. Are you friendly? Are you outgoing? If you're applying for a job where you're going to have to deal with clients, are you comfortable with people? They're going to ask you about your life goals. They can ask you certain things, like they usually can't ask you if you're married and how's your marriage going, and are you planning to have any kids, and if you have any kids, are you planning to stay home from work? They can't ask those kind of questions. But they can sometimes get that information through other sources, and if you drop information, then they might pick up on it, so be careful. They'll tell you about salary and benefits. This is where you want to ask those questions. What's the salary range for this job? They might say it's between $45,000 and $60,000. So you can ask the question, well, where would I qualify? Or what are the qualifications of somebody who makes 60 as opposed to somebody who makes 45? Because that might be the difference for you. You might really like the job, but if they offer it to you at 45, you don't want it. If they offer it to you at 60, you'll take it. And then what are the company policies? What's sick leave? What's vacation time? What kind of hours do they expect you to work? When you start working there, what kind of a computer are you going to get? If it's a job where you're going to be traveling, do you get a company car, or do they pay for, there's all kinds of things like that. What kind of insurance do you get? If you have a family, do they have family insurance? And so forth. Various different things you can ask there. Okay, so let me stop at that point. I'm going to show you some examples, but any questions? Okay, let me go to, let's see, which one here all right, so I've got a couple of examples of cover letters. Actually, let me show you the resume too. Let me show you the resume first. I asked, actually, some of you know Anya, so I actually asked her if I could show her resume, and she said yes. So if you don't know Anya, she was graduated here last year. And she was here for 2 years. She's now working in New York City as a data scientist. So a couple of years ago, I ran this as part of a course, and people submitted their resume. So this is a 2-year-old resume, but I thought it was a pretty good example of one. So notice that up top, she has her contact information, where she lives, and her email address and her phone number. And then she tells you about her education. So she tells you that she's in the biostatistics program at Brown. She tells you what her undergraduate degree was, that she was on the dean's list, what her GPA was, a couple of honors she had, what her major was, when her date of graduation was. This is an exchange program she did. Now she tells you about some of her skills. Notice that these are very succinct. She's fluent in French, English, Spanish, and Serbo-Croatian, and she knows elementary Greek. All right, she's proficient in Microsoft Office and DATStat. She's experienced with C++, RStata, and SAS. And she belongs to the American Statistical Association and the Institute of Mathematical Statistics. All right, so this is a pretty strong, already if I'm a statistician looking for a job, this is somebody who's looking pretty strong to me, right? She's got language skills, she knows computing, she's gone to good university, she's expecting a master's degree, she belongs to the right organizations. Okay, now she's going to tell you about her research experience. So she's working in the Center for Evidence-Based Medicine at Brown, and she tells you the dates, what her position is, and then she tells you a little bit about what she did in that job. And then she tells you that she worked at Lifespan in Rhode Island Hospital, and she was a clinical research assistant there, and then here are all the different things she did. So for example, she collected, compiled, and processed data. She analyzed large data sets, interviewed human subjects, created a database platform for electronic data, coded data based on content, assessed data collection methods, and so forth. So I can read that. That's only 4 lines. I can read that, and I have a pretty good idea of what that job was and what skills she's learned. In an interview, I can then probe that a little bit further. Okay, well, you collected, compiled, and processed data. How did you collect it? Does that mean you actually went out and administered surveys? Or does it mean that you got surveys and you entered them into the computer? What exactly does that mean? And then she's a legislative research assistant, and she worked in the State House. She worked for the Red Cross. So she's got a lot of skills here, which are not just statistics. She's also been communicating with people. She knows something about policy. She knows something about how things fit into the world at large, right? So that's important stuff. And then she tells me what her teaching and professional experience is. So these are different organizations that she worked with while she was in college. So she worked with the Alliance Française, which is a program which teaches French to kids. She worked in an English as a second language committee. And I know already from the fact that she knows, well, I know her that she's from Bosnia, so Serbo-Croatian is actually her native language. So I already know that she's an English as a second language person. So the fact that she's actually volunteering here tells me that she really cares about other people who might be learning English as a second language, right? And then she was a translator, and she's a co-founder of a club. So this is a person I know who is really involved, wants to help people, is energetic, is a starter, is a go-getter. She's gonna start things. She's gonna. If I hire her, she will probably do all these things in the job as well. So I already have a pretty good idea that this person is not just somebody who's going to, sit in front of a computer all day and program and never talk to anybody. She's going to be somebody who, for example, if I want my employees to have a good time at work and I'm looking for somebody who's going to organize the company picnic or going to organize the company softball game or is going to organize pizza lunches every week, this is the kind of person who might do that, right? So she's going to bring a lot of things to me. All right, so now here's a letter. So let's read this letter, and you tell me whether you think this is a good letter or a bad letter. So it's got the date, the employer's address, their title, where they live. Dear Mr. So-and-so, I am contented to apply for the position of a statistician which was advertised on uscandajob.com. This is a position I feel ready to fill in view of the fact that I was a full-time statistician for ABC Company California for 2 years prior to relocating to Lansville. Okay, first of all, what do you think about that first paragraph? She doesn't sound very enthusiastic. And why do you say that? Okay, so she says, I am contented. Now, this is a language issue. This is one of those things that can sometimes pop up if English is not your first language. Content is a positive word. Content means I like this. But it also has this implication of it's okay, but I'm okay with the way things are now, and they're fine, and I don't really need to do anything about it. So I am contented to apply for a job. First of all, that would not be the way you would say it. You'd say, I'm excited to apply for the job, probably. So this is a word which kind of says, yeah, this job's okay, but it doesn't really, wow me. But that's probably not what this person meant. They probably just didn't understand the meaning of that word. So this is why it's really important, if English isn't your first language, to make sure that you have somebody whose English is their first language, or a writing center person, because Brown has a lot of support for this in the career labs. Have them look over this and tell you whether this is the right thing. Okay, so language aside, what about the rest of it? So if we go back to what we talked about before, do they tell you what job they're applying for? Well, they sort of have. They say the position of statistician, which was advertised on uscandajob.com. Now, if that was the only statistician job advertised, that's okay. That's explained it. But if it isn't, then it's not quite all there. And then they tell you what their previous experience is. Well, I was a full-time statistician for ABC Company for 2 years prior to relocating. So that's telling you a couple of things. Maybe that they want you to know, and maybe that they really shouldn't be telling you, is that they were a full-time statistician. They don't really tell you what they did yet, but then they relocated, but they haven't told you why they relocated. So that can be code for a couple of things. That could be my life changed. For example, if you're married and your spouse gets a new job, then you relocate and you need a new job. Or it could mean that I either got fired from that job or I didn't like that job, and so I left it and I'm relocating. Maybe I'm relocating there because this is where my family lives, but you don't know. Okay, then the next paragraph says, I'm very much experienced in conducting research into the mathematical basis of the discipline of statistics, building up statistical methodology, and giving advice on the practical application of statistical methodology. That says really nothing at all. All that says is I know some statistics and I do some methodology and I give advice on, that doesn't really say anything more than I was a full-time statistician. And then it tells you a little bit of skills. I have good skills. Well, good skills, not great skills, or I'm an expert in, or I've developed programs in this. This is kind of a weak sentence. and I work with big multiple data sets. That's a very broad statement, right? Could I plan with meeting with you to go over my resume and to learn more regarding your company? Well, that's probably not how you want to ask for an interview. I'd really like to interview with your company. I'm really excited to be working for you. I will be glad to come to your office any weekday. Just say, I'll be glad to come meet with you anytime. Please call me on my cell phone so we can arrange a meeting time that works for you. You could say, you can either call me or I'd be happy to call you if that's convenient. Please give me a number. And I'm grateful for your time in reading my cover letter. Okay, well that's kind of that's okay. But this is a pretty weak letter. All right, we don't have much time left, so let me just give you one more letter that's a little bit better. Okay, dear Mr. Morales, I'm submitting this letter to express my interest in the statistician position being offered by Clinical Solutions Group. I fully believe that I can offer the skills and experience needed to fill this position and be an asset to your company. I've spent the last 10 years obtaining special training in this specific field. During this time, I've obtained my master's degree in statistics from Kansas State, and I'm working on my PhD. Okay, so this is a much more positive kind of statement. This really indicates that this person has been doing a lot. They're really interested in the job. It's not that they've really said a lot, but it's just the way they're saying it is more positive. I possess exemplary skills, all right, in mathematics and have experience in the following areas: developing analytic programming, collaborating with project teams, anticipating data and informational needs, summarizing and recording all studies. Specific things they've done that people would like to know about. I possess excellent leadership skills and have a general knowledge of all these different things. My ability to work independently will surely qualify me, and I'm confident that I can meet and exceed your expectations. Please contact me to make arrangements to interview where we can discuss this position and the qualifications needed in more detail. I'm looking forward to hearing from you soon. This is a letter which says, I'm a really competent person. I have a lot of skills. I am the right person for your job. I really want it. I want to meet with you. Okay? This is the kind of cover letter that an employer would look at and say, yeah, let me put this one in the pile of people to look for. And then, of course, they'd look to the resume. All right? So we'll try to, we're sort of out of time here, but we'll try to do a little bit, maybe a little more of this next time in terms of thinking about job strategies. We'll post these up. There are some questions, job interview questions, and there's a nice PDF here that appeared in the American Statistician, AmStat News, applying for a job. There's some by Ralph O'Brien, and there's some nice references and also some suggestions about what you can do. So we'll put that up and take a look at that. And then, if you've got questions, we can raise them next time when we continue on. I think next time we're talking about the research process, if I'm remembering correctly. But I want this to be sort of a conversation too. So. Okay, any questions for now? Okay. Where what? Okay, so that's going to be up at the Biostat website. So we'll post the videos up there, and we're also going to post the slides. Okay, so we'll have a little thing on the front page that tells you where to go. Okay, thank you.